So I always tell people, first and foremost, if you can walk in and sit down with somebody and in 30 minutes, an hour, they can tell you exactly what program to buy, get up and walk out. Because if you've never met that person, they don't know you, right, Bruce? You and I both know you want to know them. You want to understand what they need. What is their family situation? You have to actually know someone to make the right decision for them.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask the Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein, and I believe everybody needs to have a plan in life, whether it's a tax plan, a financial plan, a college plan, an exit plan, an estate plan, a weight loss plan, a fitness plan. Planning's about being proactive. I've got a dear friend. I haven't seen this beautiful woman in a couple of years. Her name is Kim Sixkiller. She's out in the Midwest, in the Kansas City. We won't talk about the Chiefs. I don't think are you a Chief fan? I don't even know if you're a Chief.
I'm a Chiefs fan.
Oh, you're a Chief fan. All right. I should have worn red. She is the chief, I never heard of this, a chief insurance officer, a CIO, but I always think of it as information when I hear CIO, but she's with Market Advisory Group. She's out in the Midwest, and she's very involved in the insurance industry. She's somebody I met a few years ago at some of these insurance conferences that are out there. She's a doll, and I'm thrilled to have her on the show with me and reconnect with her. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about the changes in the insurance world when it comes to long-term care and maybe wrap that a little bit around life insurance. I saw you post something recently and I jumped on that post and said, hey, why don't you come on the show and let's talk about what you're sharing with others and talking about. See, I'm babbling on, but you use the word redesign. So let me toss that to you. How do you mean? What do you mean? Let's educate everybody on what long-term care was about, the evolution of it, where we are today, because as you used the term a few minutes ago, the word redesign. So let's start there.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. It's great to see you as well. So with long-term care, I'm a huge advocate for that because in most cases, when people have initially thought about long-term care in their lives, they've thought about something that's only going to help them when they're actually placed into some kind of care facility, right? And confinement to a facility is no longer a deal breaker on these products. As well as when I talk to people about long-term care, there's so many people who will say, I'm not old enough for that yet. I'll look at that later.
Right.
And so really, I spend most of my time talking to Gen Xers and even some millennials now about, hey, you should be thinking about this too, because if something happens to you in your 40s, in your 50s, right? Like there's still going to be a need. And the longer you wait, the more expensive insurance gets, as we know. So there's a huge redesign in the way these products were modeled and the way that you can really fill the gap in your retirement plan.
So I liked how you teed it up there a little bit. You're never the adage in the world of insurance is you're never going to be younger than you are today. And in theory, you're never going to be healthier than you are today. And when you're dealing with life insurance and long-term care as two big insurance components, they are age-based driven. They are health related. You have to be insurable. And so when I get the 83-year-old that his daughter's calling me and he's on his way to an assisted living, and now they want to buy long-term care insurance, it's like, sorry, folks, like you're past that window. You can't crash your car and then call your Geico and ask them to cover you for car insurance. You have to have your insurance before the need. And so you threw out a couple of terms, the Gen X. I kind of know what the millennials are. I don't know what the definition of the Gen X is age-wise, but you could fill that in. But for me, I started doing long-term care counseling in my financial planning space in the early mid-90s, 94, 95, 96 is when I really got involved and used it. And those programs and products are all but gone. As you said, it's been redesigned. And they were the standalone, straight up long-term care. Home care was an option. It was a rider. It was an add-on. You would have to explain to people, like, you can't buy home care on its own. You have to buy the main policy, and then you add it as a rider, kind of like buying leather seats in your car. It's an upgrade. And
Yeah.
obviously, if there's a couple involved, they want to stay at home as long as possible. And that home care became a very big thing. But then when the financial crisis happened, this is education for the listener out there, is there were a series of events and calamities, if you will. But the bottom line is our demographics in this country, we have extended life expectancy. And so when I was doing these programs in the 90s, maybe they were using age 78 to 82 or, so early 80s, maybe, definitely late 70s as a life expectancy model. And now, as most people in the financial planning space, if you don't prepare for people's life expectancy to go into their 90s, everybody's going to run out of money. And so you can't be that short-sighted on an age band for this retirement plan, right? And so the programs were grossly underfunded, and companies folded, they got bought out, the products got repriced. Like, there was a whole series of events and activities, which leads us to today in 2025 and the evolution of the programs and the coverages. And that's what we're going to dive deeper in with you here. But what used to be just doesn't work anymore. It got astronomically expensive. So as we've discussed on the show in the past, there's now the evolution of the hybrid products, right? So let's talk more about that and your exposure, your experience, and we'll kind of tie it back into the, how to use this kind of stuff. But why don't you tell us a little bit about these hybrid products?
So kind of in that hybrid range, that's where I was talking about really your Gen Xers, kind of your latchkey kids. So that really is the generation born from 1965 to 1980. Unfortunately, that's, kind of where they cut it off. I was born in 1982. We always said we're part of a Gen X, and now we get lumped into the millennials, but that's a whole nother conversation.
I'm still a boomer. I'm barely a boomer, I guess.
You're barely a boomer.
Yeah.
The key to that generation, though, is a lot of individuals are they're still very vivacious, and they don't feel like they need to consider this long-term care. But on the other hand, they've watched their own parents start to need it, or their grandparents need it. And so the evolution of the products has been really in that hybrid of looking at things and going, okay, statistically, we do live longer, and statistically, less people are apt to go into a home, right? If they can, they want to stay in their home. And there are far more different facility options than there used to be, right? It's not just, hey, you've got a full service nursing home or you've got an independent home. You've got assisted care, you've got independent care, you've got home aid plus care. It just depends on your region and what's available. But the products that are out there today, what I love about them, and as you mentioned with car insurance earlier, is I decided to make an investment in a long-term care product. And if I'm lucky and I never have to go into one, or maybe I'm terribly unlucky and I didn't go into one because something happens and I'm just tragically gone, there is a portion of investment, there's a piece of that funding that will pass on to whoever I assigned as my beneficiary, right? So it's not like that old Chris Rock joke of insurance. If something happens, shouldn't I get my money back? It kind of is that hybrid of, well, now someone will get some of that money, right? So we're not just throwing the money in the air. So that's the great part.
There was definitely the conversations in the past with the original programs of, it's use it or lose it. And if they're spending $4,000 to $6,000, back then it was like $3,000, $4,000, $6,000 a year for a couple, which in today's dollars, relatively inexpensive in theory. But back then, again, in the 90s, 30 years ago, that was a different number and a different percentage. But what I ultimately did, and the way I always counseled clients, was you give me your budget. We're looking at your income. We're looking at your expenses. And I use the acronym Woody Woofy. What do you want for yourselves? Like, what are your hopes, dreams, desires? And so it's your budget. You got to give me the budget. And now we plug in that budget. If I make up the numbers, it's not real. Your numbers are your numbers. And then we project out based upon rates of return. The whole thing of planning and proactivity and the Planman show is to understand where you're heading by having these projections in the plan. The financial plan's a projection. And then if you don't like where you're going or you're falling short of the goals you want, you're not hitting your woody woofies. Well, today's the first day you can fix it, right? You can't go back and say, oh, I wish I bought Apple 15 years ago. Like, you got to decide, do I want to buy Apple today? And that make that decision. So where do I put my money? How do I spend my money? And then on the back end, the biggest fear factor is the fear of running out of money. And so now when you're using these projections, and then what I used to do is then say, okay, and again, these programs don't exist anymore, but bear with, is if we could put a long-term care program with lifetime coverage, which is what was offered back then. That was the Cadillac of Cadillacs. It was lifetime coverage, not 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but lifetime for that $6,000, $4,000 number. What does that do for you financially is it takes the burden of burning your own money. If it's $125,000, $10,000 a month type of cost in today's dollars, do you want to rip through your own assets? You want your girls to get your money, or do you want to burn your money when that event occurred, or God forbid it occurred? So go ahead.
No, yeah. And those products were great. And, one of my partners here at Market Advisory Group, he has a grandpa who had one of those plans, right? So you look at how much he paid in and the $1 million that he's gotten out of it over, he's been in a nursing home for, I believe Jonathan said, over 20 years.
Wow.
And so those are great. But what happened after those Cadillac of products came a new genre of products that weren't so great. And what we found out was people would buy them, like you said, and maybe they're paying $6,000 a year, but the plan was they were going to get, 10 grand a month for 3 years. But then 4 years later, company X came along and said, oh, the cost is going to go up 25%. But if you can't afford that, we're going to just drop your benefit, right? And that's where you see so many people who were like, I had to drop the plan, or my benefit went from this to this.
Yeah,
and the beautiful thing about some of these products today is now you're entering a contract agreement that they say, this is what you're going to pay. This is what you're going to get. And as long as you continue to pay that premium, regardless of what's happening with inflation and different things, this is your premium. And oh, by the way, not many, but there are some carriers out there that you can get those lifetime benefits again. So you don't have to be limited to that 5, 6, 7 years. You can pay the cost and say, hey, I want to make sure I get $10,000 a month for the rest of my life, or even the products that are out there that are meant for the spouses, and say, hey, we're both going to be covered under one plan. So some really cool options out there to really fill that gap.
That's awesome. I wasn't made aware that the lifetime programs could be there. They got very expensive. You're 100% right. The letters that clients got that I put in these programs years ago, the rates were doubling and tripling. Now, it took time to get there. It didn't happen overnight because they have to apply to the insurance commissioners and their states and get approval for rate increases. But they are allowed, and they can, and they justify and show. But it was 20 and 30% increases for a couple of years. It got phased in. But ultimately, it was, as you just said, is we can move you into this program for the same price. If you want to continue the program that you have, this is the new price. And most people are like, well, I don't want to spend all that extra money that I wasn't expecting. But, it has served its purposes over the years. And again, it was, it's 30 years ago. For me, and I guess this is where the Gen X, as you referred to, my ideal conversation would start somebody usually in their early 50s, maybe as young as, late 40s. So 48 to 52, would kind of be the conversations. They're still healthy. Rates are still certainly more modest than somebody who's in their 60s, right? And 70s. The prices really start to escalate because there's all those years you didn't pay in. If you're paying in at 50, they're going to get you for 30 years of payments. You start paying at 60, they're only going to get 20 years of payment. So, there was always some math involved in how they figured those things out. But let's talk about the hybrids, what you see out there, what's available. I know the hybrid tied to the annuity, I'm not overly versed on. I've done the hybrid life insurance, but I personally haven't had the opportunity yet to do the annuity. But let's talk about how those programs work, where and how you implement them, and what we can educate people on for their consideration of how these tools, can benefit. Because as you just said earlier, to clarify to my listener, the new programs, somebody gets paid. The money's not lost. So I want to hone that point in. The programs I used to do that are more obsolete and gone, it was use it or lose it. If you both died and you paid all those premiums, there was no refunds, there was no money back, and the money's gone.
Right.
But now, if it's tied to life insurance, as an example, there's a death benefit.
And those programs, I'm not saying they don't exist anymore. They still exist. You can still buy the user programs. We simply
super expensive, super expensive,
and we just don't offer them. From a fiduciary standpoint, they don't make sense when they look at the other things on the market. And so really, when we're sitting down with a potential client, for us, it's education, and you have to understand that client. So I always tell people, first and foremost, if you can walk in and sit down with somebody and in 30 minutes, an hour, they can tell you exactly what program to buy, get up and walk out. Because if you've never met that person, they don't know you, right, Bruce? You and I both know you want to know them. You want to understand what they need. What is their family situation? You have to actually know someone to make the right decision for them, right? I can hone in on a couple options in one meeting, but I'm not going to give you 100% this is your thing, right? It's very few and far between. With the products that are hybrid between the life insurance and the annuity, generally what we're looking at is obviously the client's assets, the money that they have to put in up front versus the money that they want to put in on an ongoing premium percentage. Are they using cash that they have in different savings, or are they wanting to use investable assets that maybe they have in a 401k, an IRA, those different options? And then really for us, you have to focus in on that client's health, right? So healthier individuals are going to be more likely to qualify for life insurance at better rates. That's just a fact of the life insurance industry. If you're not as healthy, or you can't qualify on the life insurance side, that doesn't mean that you can't qualify on an annuity attached side, because typically there's just a few drop questions on that side. And for some of them, you just have to be able to complete your 6 acts of daily living, right? So when I talk about that, and if somebody's saying, hey, I don't understand what's an act of daily living, long-term care insurance is based off of your ability to perform simple tasks, right? Bathing, transferring, continence. When you're looking at those 6 options, and I could list all the options, but people are like, we're here listening, we know about long-term care. You can still get coverage without having to go through a full underwritten process. And what I really love in the annuity industry side of things, not getting into suitability and all of that, is there is now a groundbreaking product out there through a specific company that their payment option is a non-confinement option. It is one of the first ones that I've seen. And what it's saying is, if you get to a point after you're on our product that you no longer have that ability to complete your 6 acts of daily living, right? We will, in fact, start that rider payment up, but you don't have to go into a facility. You do not have to be confined to a nursing home. So you can utilize it for home health care. And that's a game changer, because until recently, those riders that were attached to annuities really did hone in on you had to be in a nursing home. You had to have to be in a very serious state. So that's kind of the difference.
I mean, let's just, again, I know we're going to make certain assumptions, but let's not. So there's 6 activities of daily living. Most policies in the past required 2 of the 6 to be deficient. Usually, and people are like, well, who decides that? Your own doctor, can submit reports. Now, anything cognitive, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, that's cognitive. That's pass go, collect $200. Like you're going to get paid. But if somebody's arthritic, like I always share the stories, my 90-year-old grandmother had her cognitiveness, but physically she was arthritic. So she had trouble cooking. She had trouble buttoning her clothes, showering. She's frail and 90, so her activities of daily living would have easily have triggered. There was no insurance. And she was what we called custodial care, right? There's some buzzwords there. And so my father and my aunt took turns taking care of her. She was home care, and she had built-in help because her children provided it, right?
Yeah, and those, just so we don't assume, those fundamental, like we said, those 6, it's your bathing, your dressing, your toileting, your transferring, your eating, and your
what's transferring? Driving?
So transferring is the movement from one place to another. So can I get from my bed to a chair?
Okay.
Or can I get from the chair to the toilet? And that's what I'm explaining to people is bathing is not, hey, I can just get into the shower and clean myself. But maybe the problem is, like your aunt who was frail, once she was in the tub, she could, take care of things, but she couldn't get in and out of the tub by herself because there's that fall risk. So it's a much larger fundamental conversation. And like you said, the doctors are the ones who are certifying and saying, yes, you need assistance. You have an inability to perform 2 of these 6 fundamental life skills.
So tie that in. So now when you're saying non-confinement, what it sounds like is some of the early adopter products. Yes, you might be struggling with the ADLs, but you had to be in a more confined facility, i.e. nursing home, versus now they've kind of lowered that a little bit to where home care, assisted living, they will cover, versus back, the original products had different riders for exactly that. Home care was a separate add-on. So you had to pay extra if you wanted the ability to have these services in your home. Otherwise, it was more catastrophic. It was just, I need a nursing home. It's full blown. I don't have my wits anymore. I'm standing in the corner, and I got dementia and we need to be put in a facility. Right. But as a couple goes, from my experience, the couple wants to stay together as long as possible, and they want to stay in the same location. Now, the CCRCs, the community care retirement centers, have provided some of that. Some people go into those without insurance and they leverage and use those programs, and it provides services for them, and others have insurance and they get the insurance to pay for it. So again, it's just, what is it? It's planning. It's understanding the markets. It's understanding, where do you want to be? My father and stepmother are in Connecticut. Like, they're in a CCRC in Connecticut, since he turned 80, and he'll be 89 next month. So, they're in there 9 years. They put him through tests at 80 to make sure he had his cognitive, passed the cognitive tests. My stepmother's like 7 years younger, so it wasn't as problematic. But he had to jump some hurdles. Now, they never bought insurance. They don't believe in insurance. They're not insurance people. But they sold their home. They took those assets. They bought into a facility. They made a buying decision. Those assets are gone. They're not going to go to me. They're not going to go to my stepsister. Like, they've made that decision, right? So everything we're talking about is about your Woody Woofy. What do you want? What do you want for yourself? How do you see things transpiring? You have $500,000. You have $5 million. Whatever it is you have, where do you want it going? And then how do you properly distribute it? How do you properly place it? And then, oh, by the way, how do I take care of myself, right? It's my health, my needs.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we have really done at Market Advisory Group is we have a partnership with an entity that they work very similar to, if you've ever heard of like a Place for Mom, right? Where you can go online and you can kind of see opportunities to what might be available to your loved one. Well, a lot of people who are dealing with it for the first time, they don't know what questions to ask. They don't know their needs. They understand they need a facility, but they don't know the difference between facilities that have the ability to take on a dementia patient and don't, there's a lot of different things that you have to check the boxes. As you said, the cognitive tests that you have to jump through. And so we have a team that works with all of our clients. There's no charge for our clients on that. And they're called the assisted living locators, and they will work with them. They do the questionnaires, help them kind of figure out what they need, really draw that down to about 3 to 5 of the nursing homes or the assisted living, the different facilities in our region. And then they go on those tours with them, because it's great to have an idea of what you want to do, but to be on that tour at that facility, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what questions to have, to ask, or to make sure are covered. And so we help them with that side of things as well, because long-term care is more than just, hey, I have a product or a plan in place. do I know how to utilize it? Do I know what my rights are? And so we like to really focus in on that side as well.
Well, it's a nice add-on that you're providing, because, like you said, you don't. Why I do the show, and one of my little taglines is, "You don't know what you don't know." That's why you got to keep watching the show. Is we're here to educate, right? And we're here. My job, and I'm approaching 40 years of doing all of this stuff, whatever you want to define it as, and it's about understanding. It's about asking the right questions. And so for me, I have the litany of questions. You have the litany of questions. And part of our job counseling people is to tell them what they don't know and to help guide them or hold their hand. And you're taking it beyond that of well, we're going to go to facilities with you. Like, we're going to show you like some of the stuff. These are the questions you want to ask between this facility and that facility, or this home care service versus that one. And there's always the questions of Medicare and Medicaid, and what people are trying to do to skirt the system a little bit, if you will, and not pay and hide money, and those days are very limited. If I tell this one story, I had a client. This is in the 80s. She was all excited, and she had money to transfer to me as her her stockbroker at the time was the title we had, and she was all proud of herself because she had her mother gift her all this money, and then got her mother onto Medicaid, which was then covering her mother's nursing home cares, and the daughter got the $300,000 or $400,000 that they hid, that they slunk away with, and you can't get away with that anymore. But she was all happy, and I'm like, I'm kind of happy because I'm going to get the money to manage, but then I'm like, well, who's paying for her mother's care? You and me, Kim. Every listener out there, that's who's paying, because the government is our money. The government's paying for it through the Medicaid system. And where's the money coming from? Is it tax?
And like you said, that's going to get, they catch that on the 2-year look back now, right? They're doing that look back on your Medicaid, your spend down. But with a client like that, not then, but now, if that client showed up at my door, I would have, so at Market Advisory Group, we have a full service law firm that's part Eidelman Law Firm. Sure. So our attorneys, I would direct that person to have a conversation with them and say, do you have a Medicaid asset protection trust? Because we know if we put the assets into that, there's a lot of assets you can put into that aren't subject to the spend down, right? You can keep your IRA, put it in that spend down. Now, there are caveats and there are requirements behind it, but there are things you can do to move things so they are not subject to that spend down and that 2-year look back. And again, it's all about the education, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that makes our job so exciting is we both know, like, there are things out there, like when you talk about stockbrokers and assets under management, I look at you and go, yeah, that's not my job. That's what you do, Bruce. That's the experts over there. And I like to help make sure that people are taken care of so they know, how can I protect my assets so that if something happens, everything I worked hard to pass on to my family isn't gone as well. Exactly. How do I continue to pass that legacy or, get some of that estate planning out of the way so that Uncle Sam doesn't get to take all that money in the taxes when I pass. So there's just so many different things out there. People have to, step back and go, okay, maybe I should go get some education on these different things.
Well, because it's why the trusted advisor, the tax person, the estate planning attorney, the financial advisor, the insurance advisor, whomever, whatever. But, I've become kind of this hybrid long-term, planning strategist over the years. How I built it. Now these days we're not managing assets as much as doing the insurance work. Right. But I spent 30 years counseling people. Like, you can't take that knowledge away. So I still want to help people understand, how do you connect the dots? This is all about connecting the dots. This is the ultimate exit strategy, if you think about it, right? And people, I'm going to retire, and I say, what are you retiring to? And then it's like, well, how did you make that decision? How long is your money going to last? When do you start using principal instead of just a rate of return off of your principal? What happens when the market drops 40% and you don't want to tap principal anymore? What are you going to do? Like, how do you ride out that next bear market, however long that might be, right? Like, I'm doing this long enough to see market corrections and crashes. So people's money and how they handle their money comes with a fear factor. There's a fear of scarcity. There's a fear of abundance. There's a fiercity of running out of money. There's a fiercity of underutilizing the money, not having enough money, like all of these things. And then it's like, well, the horse that got me there is not necessarily the horse I'm taking out on the back end. I need a different horse, right? And
Absolutely.
so that's where all of this consultation comes in, because as you just said, there's Medicare and Medicaid type trusts that might protect assets. Not my bailiwick, not your bailiwick. Go down the hall to talk to your legal department, right? I've had 4 estate planning attorneys on the show to talk about 4 very different topics around estate planning. So even though they're all estate planning attorneys, there's different nuances tied to estate planning, depending on what and how your situation and the complexity is. So there's guardianship, there's elder care, there's special needs, AB, like there's a gazillion things you could throw out. So you and I do this, and it's a lot of information for us. Imagine the layperson. John Q. Public, I tell people all the time, like, there's a reason Kim and I are in business. Like, we're here because people are not understanding. They're not well-versed. I don't want to insult and say they're not educated, but there's a level of uneducation. They don't understand how all of this, there's no textbook. Did you and I go to school to understand long-term care economics 101? Like that wasn't in my business class. That wasn't in my computer class. Like my typing class didn't cover that. Like, come on.
Yeah. And then I think there's just the niche of, like, for example, like I said, I'm talking to people younger. You were talking about what age you start talking to people. I help a lot of people who are in their early 40s, and a lot of people in their early 40s still have kids at home. Mm-hmm. And here's the deal. Long-term care is not just about your end of life. I have a client who he has a plan that he has had to utilize. He's a construction worker, and he broke his neck on his job site.
Oh boy.
He lived, but he was in traction for quite a long time. When you think about the long-term haul back to being healthy, right? It took him 2.5 years before he was able to return to work. 2 young kids, single dad. How do you support yourself?
Right.
He was very fortunate that he had purchased a long-term care plan that allowed him to receive payments. People say, oh, well, he had workman's comp. Have you ever done a workman's comp claim? Do you know how long it can take
years
to get the funds? Do you know how long it can take to get bills paid? You start getting things from collection, and you shouldn't have to pay any of these bills.
Right.
Look, Bruce, you and I have sat down and talked about the officers who have been shot in the line of duty, that they still live, but they're waiting on someone to pay their bill. Like, this stuff happens every day.
Yeah.
And these are people who they're lucky they're still here. They're in their 40s, they're in their 50s. But how do we make sure that you're taken care of in the interim? And how do we make sure that your family is taken care of? And so those are kind of the conversations and the stories that you want to make sure people know so they can make an educated decision. We have a couple about 45 minutes north of us that they have a pizza parlor, and he was in a car wreck. A drunk driver hit him. And if it wasn't for the fact that they had insurance in place, small mom and pop pizza, they would have lost everything. When you know, as a business owner, you take half of that off it. If Robin tomorrow says, I'm not going to help you behind the scenes anymore, Bruce, you're going to be like, right? So having some way to be able to pay even a high schooler to go deliver those pizzas allowed them to stay in business and get back on their feet. So it's just looking at things and understanding there's so much more to this than just, I'm getting old and I need a nursing home.
So let me just tie that in, because a lot of what you just described would be deemed under disability insurance as a root protection, where somebody's self-employed, they lose their ability to earn their income. And so do you tie that in as well? I mean, I know you're more in the LTC space, but we talk to people about disability, like you're self-employed, like you need to have, if you make $10,000 a month, or you have a partner, you need key person insurance. Like you mentioned, Robin doesn't want to work, but if Robin can't work, how do I replace her and come up with a salary? Well, I better have some kind of key person disability coverage. A little bit different than your LTC conversation.
Yeah, it can. But in both of those instances, neither of them were actually self-employed. One of them worked for a construction company. One of them, their mom and pop pizza shop, that was their side gig. They had a full-time. So they didn't have disability insurance because it didn't ever really fit the conversations they had with people. Now they could have had some help through that had they had it. Sure. They had short-term disability, different things. But at the end of the day, again, it's just sitting down and really looking at all the options available to you and going, what's going to make the most sense, right?
Well, it's like you said earlier, it's not one size fits all. Let me go to the textbook and turn to page 17 and says, aha, here's the answer, right? I always say to people is, I'm a tailor. And so I have to size you up and I have to fit you in and mold what you need to your situation. And the benefit that you and I have is we've got a big suitcase of material. And so if I'm only selling yellow markers and you need a blue marker, I'm walking out with no sale, right? So
Absolutely.
I've always wanted to be that, my tagline these days is if it has an I, I'm your guy, anything insurance related. People, do you do dental insurance? Yes. Do you pet insurance? Yes. You do car insurance? Does it have the word insurance? We do it, right? Like I'm not a niche only advisor. And they say the riches are in the niches where people just do Medicare or they just do long-term care or whatever it is. But if you're going in a long-term care situation and they needed Medicare and you don't do Medicare, you're walking out. There's no transaction, right? There's no opportunity there in the immediacy. So for me, it's always been, let me understand your situation. And then this is what's in my suitcase. And if I don't have what's in your suitcase to fit the need, it's a consultative approach, then we'll find the people that do. And maybe it's an attorney that needs to draft a document, for your estate plan, or a tax person or, whatever it is. So, surrounding yourself with trusted advisors, building that trusted advisor group is, where you and I and others collaborate. It's like, hey, let's bring Kim into the conversation because she's going to help us disseminate some of this deeper. Kim mentioned earlier about the annuity. I want to talk about that annuity program before we start to wrap up. I'm familiar with the life ones, but, again, to beat the horse here is it's a plan, right? It's being proactive. It's understanding, hey, there's a backside to this problem. Like the problem is I'm potentially going to die with or without money, right? Like I know I'm going to die. I don't know when, and I don't know what my bank account's going to be when that happens. Am I going to be owing a lot of people money? Am I going to have a lot of money left over to leave to people? And then who do I want that money to go to? And is it structured the right way to get it to them, right? There's a million of those trapdoor questions. And so along the way, now I'm 87 and I fell down and I broke my hip and now I need to be in rehab and my organs are failing and I need to be in a nursing home and I need round the clock care. Who's paying for that? Right? And that's the who's paying for that. And the families that have dealt with it with a older family member are the easiest people to sign up, right? Like, cause they just walked away with grandma at 90 going, I don't want that to happen to me. Let me sit down with Bruce or Kim and figure out how to protect myself so I don't have to deal with that, right? And that's the hot button, but it's conveying to the apathetic and the omnipotent why they need it. Because the pizza guy and the construction guy probably didn't think they needed it either.
Yeah, and it's kind of that, like you talk about taglines. I can't tell you how many times in appointments I've said to people, I hear you. Nobody plans on getting sick. Also, nobody gets out of life alive.
That's what I
right?
say. Life. No one gets out alive. That's what I say.
No one gets out alive. Like it's a reality. And so these are not fun conversations necessarily, but they're necessary conversations. And they're not necessarily for us or about us, right? The long-term care insurance plan or the life insurance plan or the medical supplement plan, whatever that plan is, right, that you've purchased, isn't necessarily so much about you. You want to make sure that it's in place so that you're not a burden on Robin, right? Like I want to make sure I have what I need in place because I don't want my daughter who's in the Air National Guard to have to stop being able to go on her tours of duty because she has to come home and take care of mom, right? Like I want to be as least of a burden as possible on the people I love the most. That's what it's about.
It's the selflessness and it's understanding. Like, and again, if people have heard some of my other shows, I may have mentioned this, but when my grandmother was 90 and my father was dealing with her, it came at a different cost. And the cost was his time and his availability. Now, why do I say that? Because during this time frame, I'd started my family. I had my 2 kids and my father was not at events for my younger children in the early years, because he was, and I'm using the term stuck, he made that decision that either he's bringing her with him everywhere he goes, and then when she's fatigued and tired and needs to leave, maybe he's leaving earlier than he had wanted, or he's missing the event because it was tied in. And I said to him back then, and this is over 30 years ago, I'm like, I'm not doing that for you. Let's be clear. You better have a plan, because I'm not moving in. You're not moving in with me. I'm not sacrificing my life. You have options. You're still young enough to take care of those options. Okay. He was in his 50s. I tell you, he's 89 now. So this is over 30 years ago. And eventually they did. They moved into and decided not to buy insurance, but they bought into a facility, and then they get their meals and they have socialization and their room is cleaned every week. Like they live in a hotel. It's a 2-bedroom
right?
apartment. Like it's a nice lifestyle once you're ready to move. And fortunately they moved over the years. So I don't think they were, as anchored to the family home. There was no real family home, but that is a problem with somebody's like, we raised our kids here, and we planted that tree, and I want to die here. And it's like, well, no, it's time to move on. You've been in that house for 50 years. Like it's time, you got to let it go. And a lot of people don't want to let that go.
It could be hard. Yep.
Real quick.
So that's lots of good stuff out there. I think that at the end of the day, people should, if they're not sure, we talked about the annuity side of things, just looking at what is available now. I tell people all the time, it doesn't cost you anything to sit down and have a consultation with someone like you, with someone like me. We do those initial consultations and additional consultations at no expense. Everybody's different on, how they charge for their services. When I'm helping a client with my long-term care and the things I do, I don't have a fee that I charge. So people should just go, and if it costs an hour or 2 hours of your time, at least you've decided it is or it isn't for you. So.
Yeah. No, look, a referral speaks volumes because somebody coming in has a higher level of trust. The problem is when people are searching for help, where is the trust factor, and how long does it take? And so for me, over the years, my marketing ultimately grew into doing seminars, and I would invite people to a steak dinner, a nice steakhouse in town, and I would talk about and do this retirement planning, financial planning scenario. And I would tie in estate planning in the back end and talk about long-term care. And so I had all these different topics and pain points, making them aware. And my audience was targeted to the 58-year-old to 62-year-old of like, look, you're close to the home stretch. How do you know whether it's 62, 65, 67, or 70? Like, when do you want to go and when can you go? And when I talk about my experiences, and I've shared before someday my mother dying at 45 years of age from cancer and never getting to live and enjoy and do things. So for me, getting Kim to retire as early as possible is a very big motivation for me, and helping her see that pathway. She may not want to retire at 55 or 60, but can I put her in a position that she feels comfortable when that time comes? Well, now she's in control, right? It's about control. I'm in my early 60s, and all my friends and all, everybody I went to school with, we're all in that age band now. And guess what? People are getting riffed. We're in that demographic of you're too old to have your job anymore, and we're letting you go. You make too much money. And they spend a year or two trying to find a new job, male or female. It's not just a guy thing anymore. I got a client she's 55 and she is priced out of the market. She took a buyout and got a nice package. Her company got sold, and she spent the last 2.5 years trying to find the next opportunity because she makes too much money, right? So now financially, where is she if her financial plan was derived on working for 8 more years at the salary and the savings rate that she was doing previously, well, that just hit a brick wall. She hasn't worked for 2 years. How she's living, her lifestyle has had to have changed. She can't save what she used to save. What does that do to her plan? Right? What does that put her in a position? Now, if there's enough money in place where it says, hey, you can retire at 55, well, now she's not as stressed trying to find that next job at the same pay grade, right? And everything else. So again, all of this is about the timing, the needs, the scenarios, and dealing with that, Mike Tyson punch in the face, right? Everybody has a plan till we're punched in the face. And now it's like, how do I get off the mat? And what do I deal with that? And so you and I are the precursors of building as much protection and strategy as early as possible. So when the punch in the face comes, hey, we told you that might happen, right? Like we knew this was inevitable, right? And so now we're prepared, right? I will start to wrap us up, but there was they're out of business. It was E.F. Hutton commercials. E.F. Hutton and the tagline, if you're not a Gen Xer or a baby boomer, the millennial out there listening or whatever of the X, Y's and Z's, but they were a stock brokerage firm that ultimately failed. But the commercials used to be, how did your broker know blank, whatever it was? Two people would be sitting at a table having coffee or dinner or whatever. And the other would lean in and say, she asked. So, how simple is that, right? Like if your financial advisor, your financial planner, your stockbroker, your insurance agent, your attorney, your accountant, they're asking you questions for a reason. They're trying to understand what's behind Kim and her goings on. And the more we all know, the better we can help. I don't know if you call it SWOT. We do the SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we're here to do a SWOT. We're here to say, Kim, you're 29 years of age. This is what's, transpiring. This is where you want to be in 25, 30 years. This is what you need to save. This is the amount of return you need to make, blah, 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 blah. And now we set you on your way.
Yeah.
But you got to monitor it. You got to monitor it. You're like, I got a pay raise. The stock market corrected. We're going through the tariffs. The market took a big hiccup. People are going to be freaking out. Buy, people. Just keep buying. Like the game doesn't change. The markets capitulate every now and then. We have corrections.
Right.
It's a buying opportunity. We've had 10 years of great performance in the markets. The tariffs will do what they're going to do. The markets will adjust and they'll correct. But guess what? Every price you see today, are they going to be higher in 5 years? I can't tell you about 5 weeks, but in 5 years, are they going to be higher? I'd bet on that.
Yep.
Right. So, it's relative. Now, if you're 87 and you need that money to pay for your nursing home, you probably shouldn't be in, right? You shouldn't have the same exposure, right? It's all relative.
Absolutely.
Kim, how can people, obviously they come to me. How can they reach you? What's your good contact info? People want to talk to you more about this or consult with the two of us and answer questions. What's the best way? How would you like people to reach out to you?
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can email me. My email is kim.sixkiller@marketadvisorygroup.com, or they can just go to our website, marketadvisorygroup.com. Out there's Connect with Me. They can click on our resources. We have tons of free online videos, resources, podcasts, all that stuff. We just want to get that education out there. So
bravo.
I'm on Facebook as well. I follow the Planman, so they can find me following the Planman.
We follow each other.
Yes, we do. So.
All right, I got one personal question. I saw there was a great movie back in the day, Burt Reynolds, The Longest Yard.
Sonny Sixkiller.
Huh? What was his name?
Sonny Sixkiller.
Is he related? He's got to, tell me more.
Sonny Sixkiller, the great Washington football player.
Right.
Yes, he is related to my kids' father. He is like a third cousin to his dad. So yep, they're in the same family tree. The Dawes roll for the Cherokee Nation. So yep, I get that question a lot. Sometimes I'll have people ask me about Lorenzo Lamas's character, and I'm like, that's not real, but no.
No, I saw it and I'm like, I should ask her. Like Weinstein's a dime a dozen, right? But there's plenty of Weinsteins. They're related. They're not related. You go back far enough, I'm sure they're related.
Yeah,
but
there is relation there.
The American Indian heritage and all of that stuff. But the Sixkiller, I'm like, and then I saw that I'm like, oh, but it's your married name. It's not your maiden name. But
right,
yeah. But there's still a family tie, and I just thought it was cool. I'm a big fan of the movie, The Longest Yard, and I'm like, I know that guy. I'm like. Oh, same name.
I
So
know where you
anyway,
were going.
well, thank you, my dear. It was a pleasure having you on. Please reach out to me, Kim. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Market Advisory Group. Headquarters is Kansas City. Is that the home office per se?
Right now it's still in Wichita, but we're getting ready to open what will be kind of our flagship in the Tiffany Springs area of Kansas City.
Okay. So their concentration is the Midwest. Certainly, if you're an advisor looking to add this to your book of business, we can set you up and talk to Kim. That's not something that I do. I don't have agents underneath us, but if Kim's looking for more professionals, I'm sure that might be an opportunity there. But if we can help you in anything in the world of finance, tied into long-term care, annuities, life insurance, we're the people you want to talk to. We can certainly help collaborate with you and Kim. Thank you, Kim, for being with me. Folks, another episode of Ask the Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein. Please like, share, send this episode to somebody. You want to catch people in their, Kim has a little earlier view of age, but mid to late 40s, early 50s. You start getting 60s, 70s and beyond. Your window starts to change. Prices get a little bit more expensive and affordability becomes a challenge. But look, it's never too late to start somewhere. You can only improve by knowing where your status is now, where your path is taking you, and taking corrective action. So you need some advice. Always get it right. Come ask the Planman. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Kim, so much.